The Jets win a sloppy preseason game as their fourth-string quarterback once again plays hero. We are recapping Jets Falcons today on the Locked On Jets podcast.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, this is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Tuesday, August 23rd, 2022, and I'm your host, John B. from GangreneNation.com. Thanking you for making the show your first listen or your first watch every day. This show is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. If you like what you see or hear, hit the subscribe button, and you'll never miss an episode. If you're watching on YouTube, please give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps the channel out, and it helps other Jets fans find the podcast. The Jets beat the Falcons last night in their second preseason game. The final score was 24-16. And I have to say, if you were a fan and watched that game, you are a diehard fan because this was a brutal game to watch. This was not an enjoyable game. I'll say this, if you went to that game and stayed until the end, you are the ultimate diehard fan because I cannot think of a more compelling argument to get rid of preseason games altogether than watching those 60 minutes of football. It was ugly, and I don't know that a whole lot was accomplished. And part of it, I think, is the approaches the two teams took. The Falcons played a lot of their key players early in the game. The Jets played few of theirs. In fact, any Jets veteran who was a starting player for this team sat out this game. The Jets did play a couple of their rookie starters, but no veteran of significance outside of Braxton Berrios returning a punt played for the Jets in this game. So I don't really know what you want to take away from this performance, at least as far as the headliner players go. The teams had a joint practice this week, and it seems like that's where the Jets got most of their work in. Now, in fairness, the weather was bad last night at the Meadowlands, which may have factored into Robert Saleh's decision to bench his key players, but the Falcons dominated the early stages of this game, but of course they did because they played their starters. The Jets had their backups in there, so that's no surprise. This was just ugly. 24 penalties altogether. Felipe Franks comes in for the Falcons, plays some of the worst quarterback I've ever seen in my life, regular season, preseason, or postseason. Just, it was an ugly game. Again, my hat is off to you if you watch that game start to finish. I did. I had to because I do this podcast and I write. But if you did not have to watch that game and you did not have anything better to do, I have nothing but respect for you. Now, for the Jets, I think the big storyline from this game is the number 3 quarterback spot, which I think most of us had assumed was going to go to Mike White. Mike White, of course, had that brilliant game a year ago against the Cincinnati Bengals, the team that won the AFC Championship, the team that was really one play away from winning the Lombardi Trophy back in February over the Rams. I think the question heading into training camp was whether he could beat Joe Flacco out for the backup job. I think the question now is whether he might be playing himself off the team. Because as far as I know, I believe his contract is not guaranteed. He is on a 1-year deal. And he's done nothing the first 2 weeks to justify the Jets continue going forward with him. I know they're probably going to have to keep a third quarterback with Zach Wilson's injury. They may have planned to do that anyway, at least in the early stages of the season. But White was horrible in this game. Now, yes, his completion percentage was high. He finished 12 of 17, but only 90 yards. Looked like a guy who was afraid to throw the ball down the field. In fact, a year ago, heading into that Cincinnati game, I had a ton of skepticism about Mike White, as I'm sure you did as well. And the reason for that was I watched him last preseason where he checked everything down. He was afraid to throw the ball down the field. And then the few instances where he actually did throw the ball down the field, you kind of understood why he was afraid to, because he almost threw an interception on a ball that was just, he had no zip on. And that's the issue with Mike White. It's just not clear that he's got the arm to play in the NFL. And in that game where he beat the Bengals last year, where he threw for the 405 yards, I know people might respond, well, hey, what about that game against Cincinnati? That was a real game. This was a preseason game. Well, in that game against Cincinnati, he did not throw the ball down the field more than 15 yards once. So, I mean, it was kind of a fluky game. I don't know that you could ever throw. Mike White could play another 15 years, and I'm not sure he could throw for 400 yards again in a game where he never pushed the ball down the field. It just, the ball looks awful coming out of his hand. Listen, I think arm strength is really overrated when we talk about quarterbacks, when we evaluate them. it's not something that's that important of a determinant as far as your success goes, but you have to have a minimum of it. If you don't have a minimum of it, I mean, there are just throws Mike White can't make. And even when the Atlanta backups went into the game, he was having issues. And I know he's playing with backups, and I know the Falcons played a lot of their first teamers, but I don't think this was about the competition level. I just think Mike White may not have an NFL arm. And listen, we will always have that game against Cincinnati. Mike White will always be remembered fondly in Jets lore. But at this point, I'm not sure he's even the third best quarterback on the team, which is kind of a departure for me because, I was very unenthusiastic about Joe Flacco returning, and I think the Jets should have done better than either Flacco or White. I think there were options, including, a couple guys out there who have had strong preseasons, but Mike White, I don't even know whether he's a guy you could trust to be put on the field at this point in a real game, despite what he did last year. And the other factor in this is Chris Streveler comes in and leads a second straight fourth quarter comeback in the preseason. Streveler looked really good. I was kind of dismissive of his performance against the Eagles because he didn't really do a whole lot. He had a couple of scrambles. He had the game-winning touchdown pass, but a lot of these were just, Streveler's plays were just dump-offs at the line of scrimmage. Streveler hit some passes in this game last night. I thought this was a better game for Streveler, and not he was bad against the Eagles, but I thought it was a more impressive performance than he had against the Eagles. Now, he did run the ball effectively again. Streveler ended this game six rushes, 33 yards. In fact, he was the Jets' leading rusher last night and also finished the game 8 of 11, 119 yards, 1 touchdown, and an interception. Now, the game was not a clean game for Streveler. I mentioned that interception where everybody's criticizing Denzel Mims, and I guess the ball technically hit him in the hand. It was a very suspect decision by Streveler. I thought it was a poorly thrown ball. It hit him in the hands because it was just, I thought, by pure luck. I thought it was a really poor throw. I thought it was a pass that was begging to be intercepted. Streveler also threw another pass. I don't know that Streveler really has much of a deep ball either because he threw another pass on a drive that the Jets scored on, which was badly underthrown. It was a deep ball down the right sideline. And the thing was, it was one of those passes that was so badly thrown, it actually drew a penalty because the receiver had to really adjust to the ball, and the corner who was playing him pretty much ran into him. But that was another really bad throw. So, if you're saying Chris Streveler is going to be a guy who's going to challenge Zach Wilson for the starting job, I think you should probably calm down there because Streveler himself hasn't really shown much of an ability to stretch the field. But he did show more than Mike White did last night. And Streveler brings a different element with his running skills. There are just moments where Streveler looked like he could function on some level last night. Mike White did not. And listen, again, I don't want to criticize Mike White. Mike White will always be remembered for that amazing game last year against Cincinnati. But at the time, I think the question was, what was that game against the Bengals? Was it a sign that Mike White was the next guy who was going to come off the radar and become a legit NFL starting quarterback? Was it a sign that maybe he could be a functional NFL backup? Or was it just kind of like one of those Matt Flynn games in Green Bay? Packers had this guy, Matt Flynn, years ago, who had a couple big games in starting in place of Aaron Rodgers and then left and really never functioned again. And it feels like that Mike White game was more of a fluke. And if we're going based on merit right now, I think you'd have to say Streveler has outplayed Mike White. And if you're going based on merit, who should be the third quarterback? I'd say Streveler. And if we're going based on just prognostication, who do you think could play better? Despite the fact Mike White played well in that game last year, and he did follow it up with a good first quarter against the Colts in the next game before he left with an injury. But who do I think could play better if called upon? I think I'm at the point where I might say Streveler. Now, there's one more preseason game left. White will have a chance to bounce back, and the Jets did not play Joe Flacco last night. Zach Wilson's obviously out for the preseason. So despite today being another cut-down day, the Jets will have to cut from 85 to 80 players. I don't think Mike White's going anywhere. I think Mike White will be around this weekend for the preseason finale against the Giants. He'll have a chance to rebound, a chance to redeem himself. And yes, it's very easy to get carried away with Streveler. You know, I think 2008, Brett Ratliff, guy who out of Utah, who really never amounted to anything. He was a fourth quarter superstar in the preseason. Matt Sims back in 2013. There were people who actually wanted to have Matt Sims start real games at quarterback for the Jets in 2013 because of his performance late in preseason games against practice squad level players. But I think of the two, and the Jets are going to have to keep a third quarterback, early in the season at least. I think as insurance, because Zach Wilson, even if Zach Wilson's ready to play, you want to have somebody around just in case behind Joe Flacco. And at this point, I think Streveler has played himself into consideration for this role. We'll see what happens against the Giants, but I think at this point, you might say, and it's a kind of a surprising outcome, Streveler has taken the lead in the third quarterback competition. Now, ahead here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we're going to discuss some of the disappointing performances last night for the Jets. It was a game that turned good for the Jets late, but at the beginning stages, it was pretty ugly, and we'll talk about some of the culprits. That's as we continue on this Tuesday game recap. You know, NFL games are very grueling the day after a game. Even if it's preseason, players need to recover. They need to take care of their bodies. And you can take care of your bodies with Athletic Greens 1. With one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food sourced superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging. All the things. It's lifestyle friendly, whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free. It costs you less than $3 a day. If you're investing in your health, it's cheaper than your cold brew habit. It's cheaper than getting all this different supplements yourself. You're investing in an all-in-one nutritional insurance. Athletic Greens has over 7,000 five-star reviews. It's recommended by professional athletes, trusted by leading health experts as well. And to make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do now is visit athleticgreens.com/NFL Network. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/NFL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Thank you again for making Locked On Jets your first listen every day. It's Fantasy Draft Week on the Locked On Podcast Network. However you play, experts from Locked On Fantasy Football and Locked On Dynasty Football will bring you daily positional top 10 lists to get you ready for the season. Find Locked On Fantasy Football and Locked On Dynasty Football on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And today we are recapping a Jets preseason victory. They beat the Falcons last night 24-16 at the Meadowlands. The Jets go to 2-0 in the 2022 preseason, to the extent that matters. The Jets actually have not lost a preseason game since 2019. They're 2-0 this year. They were 2-0-1 last year. There was no preseason in 2020, so it's been 3 years since we've seen a Jets preseason loss. It looked like it was going to be a preseason loss early in the game, though. The Jets got off to a terrible start to this one, and I think the number one culprit was Bryce Hall. Bryce Hall was horrible in this game. I don't think there's any other way to put it. It began on a play against Kyle Pitts where he was beaten deep. There was a play where he was beaten for a touchdown. There was a cover 3 where he got completely lost. I still don't understand what he was doing there. He just was completely out of position, nowhere near the play. It was a complete busting coverage, beaten for another first down during the second quarter. It was brutal. And, here's the thing. I don't think Bryce Hall was as bad as he looked last night, but I do think there's been this perception in the fan base that it's outrageous that Bryce Hall's heading to the bench. I don't think Bryce Hall really earned a trip to the bench based on his play last year, but you can always upgrade. And I think for whatever reason, people understand it when you upgrade from something really bad to get an okay player. If you go from really bad to okay, people think it's great. You can improve your team just as much going from okay to really good. And I think the Jets' hope is that they've done that by adding DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner over the course of the offseason. But for whatever reason, people just will not accept Bryce Hall going to the bench. And maybe this game's a reminder. Again, I don't think he's this bad, but he's nowhere near the level where people should be as upset over this. And I've heard all these theories about how the Jets are going to figure out ways to get Bryce Hall on the field. Do you really need to figure out ways to get this guy on the field? Is he really that good? I mean, one of the theories I've heard is that he's going to be used to match up against elite tight ends. Well, it didn't work so well against Kyle Pitts in this game. And the point is, Bryce Hall is going to be a backup. And I think for a backup, despite what we saw last night, he's going to be pretty good. But let's not go crazy over this. There's a reason the Jets upgraded the corner position. Bryce Hall's okay, but an okay corner is going to have nights like that. You don't want one of your corners to have nights like that. So I think this was a good reminder. I think this was a game that kind of did a good job explaining to people why the Jets made some of the moves that they made during the course of the offseason. Now, I talked about Mike White's failures, and I think you look at the reasons the Jets got off to such a slow start in this game in the first half. I mean, Bryce Hall and Mike White are at the top of the list, but while Bryce Hall was the biggest culprit on defense, I think this second team defense really struggled. I mean, they were really having issues executing basic zone schemes in this game. And, I saw a lot of trepidation online over this. I saw a lot of criticism over the coaching staff, both on my website and on other online sources. And it's like, guys, this is preseason. This is the second team. Few of the guys who played, especially during that second quarter where the Jets just kept busting coverages, but few of the guys who were on the field are going to see significant snaps for the Jets this year unless there are a lot of injuries. So I don't really get why there was so much frustration over this. I really don't, because you also have to remember that in the preseason, you're not game planning. In the regular season, you're making play calls specifically designed to optimize your defense at that given point in time against the opposition. So on second down, let's say there's a 2nd and 10 play. You are calling a play that you think specifically will work against that opponent on 2nd and 10. That's what you game planned all week. The Jets were running a much more basic scheme last night, and I think as much as anything, they're trying to see who can execute the basic plays, who can, how well these guys work together. And to a certain extent, it's a little alarming how little communication there was on the second team defense, passing off guys in zone coverage, because these are, again, very basic zone plays the Jets were unable to execute. But is it worth getting that upset over? I would say no. You have to remember none of the actual starters were on the field. Well, a few of them were, but few of the actual starters were on the field for the Jets in this game. So I can't go crazy over it. I can't say that this is something that indicates trouble ahead in the regular season, because I just don't think it does. You're dealing with backups, and for much of the night they were going up against Atlanta starting players. Now Bryce Hall again was bad, but listen, the defense was bad. I think if you're evaluating this, you do have to wonder why some of these guys are unable to execute fairly basic coverages, but I don't think it's the end of the world. I don't think it's anything worth getting too alarmed over. I don't think it's a harbinger of things to come in the regular season. And then at the tight end position, I mean, two guys who I think had bad nights, in part because somebody else had a really good night. Trevon Wesco, who's kind of on his last chance, he was penalized twice. Kenny Yeboah dropped a pass. And again, part of it's that there might only be one tight end spot left on this team, because you have to think CJ Uzama, Tyler Conklin, and Jeremy Ruckert are guaranteed spots. So that, if you're going to carry a fourth tight end, that probably only leaves one spot. I thought Kenny Yeboah, Trevon Wesco both had bad nights. I think another guy who, I don't know if he had a bad night, but one thing I noticed is that Ashton Davis was still on the field late in the fourth quarter, which is kind of ominous to me about where he stands on the roster, because if you're on the field late in the fourth quarter, it means you're a guy probably at the bottom of the depth chart. And I thought, a safety who kind of stood out last night for the Jets, and we'll talk about him in the next segment. In fact, we're going to talk about the guys who played well, because the reason I decided to do the players who did poorly in this segment is I wanted to end on a positive note since the Jets won. So we will close out this episode talking about some of the standout performances by the Jets as we close out this Tuesday game recap, as the Jets beat the Falcons last night 24-16. Of course, the Jets are looking for the right players to turn them into a winner. And as you gear up for the fall, you need the right people on your team to help your small business become a winner and fire on all cylinders. LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find the people you want to talk to faster and for free. You can create a job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. Then add your job and the purple #hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring, so your network can help you find the right people to hire. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience, so you can quickly prioritize who you want to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. And thankfully, I'm nervous every day to look there and see that Locked On might be hiring a new host of Locked On Jets. Fortunately, I have not seen anything, so I think for now my job is safe. But if you're looking for a job or you're looking to hire, LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know that every week nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. This is the Locked On Jets podcast on this Tuesday, recapping a Jets preseason victory. They beat the Falcons last night 24-16 in a game that was anything but pretty, but the Jets did get the win. They go to 2-0 on the preseason. And we're going to close out the show by talking about some of the standout performances. We talked about Chris Streveler early. He was the quarterback who led the Jets' comeback. Maybe his best receiver was Lawrence Cager. I just mentioned in the last segment about how Trevon Wesco and Kenny Yeboah did not have great nights. Lawrence Cager did. Lawrence Cager was the Jets' leading receiver with 65 yards and a touchdown. It was a 34-yard touchdown. Now, in fairness, it was a complete busting coverage. Falcons essentially had sent two guys to cover one, and Lawrence Cager ran free and, kind of was able to walk into the end zone. But Lawrence Cager continues to impress. He's done it through the offseason program, through training camp, through the first two preseason games. I think at this point it's clear Lawrence Cager is in the lead to be the fourth tight end on this team. He position change. He was a college wide receiver. Looks like he's going to make this team, at least as far as I can tell. I thought another strong night. A guy I had my eye on, Michael Clemens. He was really flashing. He's got a great motor. I mean, there were a couple times he was the unblocked guy at the end of the line of scrimmage. He ran down the line and made a tackle. He was able to collapse it. I thought it seems like he drew a couple penalties. He used that power again. And I mentioned about last week, he was lining up against guys who were practice squad level players. I mean, he lined up against guys. I mean, there was a third round pick. Atlanta had a tackle who he dominated. Michael Clemens looks like he's going to be part of a rotation this year. Now, I mean, you can go crazy. I saw people predict 10 sacks for him. Let's keep expectations in line. Fourth round rookie, but I think he's going to get playing time. And I think he's a guy the Jets are going to count on in a rotational role. I thought he looked really good. Jonathan Marshall, another guy on the defensive line, finished the game with 5 tackles, a couple splash plays. I mean, he was penetrating. He was getting into the backfield. He was really standing out. A couple big hits. Speaking of big hits, I thought Jamian Sherwood had a couple. He looked good. He was in a starting role because the Jets did not play C.J. Mosley in this game. He had finished the game with 4 tackles. Bradley Anai, a guy who might not have a spot on this team, a defensive end out of Utah, but a couple times, once in the first quarter and then once in the fourth quarter, that kind of forced a penalty. He was the unblocked guy on a bootleg type play. He did not bite. He stayed at home and he made the play. And I don't know that he really forced a fumble. Felipe Franks just kind of tripped and put the ball on the ground, but Bradley Anai was there, and so he was in the mix. Tanzel Smart, Jets got a lot of good performances on the defensive line last night. Tanzel Smart, I thought, looked like a guy who I don't know if he's going to make the team, but registered a pretty strong performance at a spot defensive tackle where the Jets don't have a ton of depth at the back of the end of the roster, so he staked a claim for the job. It's really surprising how many guys I'm talking about who played well, considering how ugly this game was in general. But there were a number of Jets who did look pretty good in this game. Even Michael Pirine broke a 7-yard touchdown run, looked pretty fast. And maybe that's a sign of how much these preseason games really matter, because Atlanta's guys, the back guys on Atlanta's roster made Michael Pirine look fast in this game. Ultimately, though, I think Chris Streveler was the star for the Jets, and I think he staked a claim for the number 3 quarterback job, a claim that will probably be decided in a final way as we close out the end of training camp and as we get to the preseason finale against the New York Giants. And again, I mean, I guess the Jets won, and I guess in the end it was kind of fun to watch Streveler go out there and play, but I began the show saying I take my hat off to you if you were at the game or you watched that game start to finish, because it was not a fun game to watch. And I will finish the show by reiterating how much respect I have for you if you watch that game from start to finish, because this game, again, it was maybe the most compelling argument I've ever seen to get rid of the preseason. And I say that in part because the Jets and Falcons really, I don't know what you learned from from that first half when the Falcons were playing their starters and the Jets weren't. Atlanta dominated, but you'd expect Atlanta to dominate. And then the Jets took over with guys at the back end of their roster. Preseason football. That's preseason football in the year 2022. But that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button. You'll never miss an episode. If you do, you'll get notifications as new episodes are posted. If you're listening on a podcast source, please give the show a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube, please give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps the channel out, and it helps other Jets fans find the show. Have a great Tuesday, everybody, and send in your mailbag questions. Tomorrow we will have our weekly mailbag.